But if you take a frog and put it in a pan of water and put the water on a stove, and if you heat the water slowly enough, the frog will cook alive without trying to jump out. You see, the environment that he's in, the water, which is all around him, is changing and heating up so slowly he doesn't notice. He doesn't notice it's sapping the life out of him. And so he'll just cook. He stays in the water and he cooks. And I think that for us as Christians, we live in an environment that will sap the life out of us if we're not careful. Because what is normal around us is completely the opposite, really, to what we are as Christians. And if we're not careful, we can start to think that those people out there are right, and that our ideas are a bit weird and a bit odd. Well, they are in the world in which we live, but that doesn't make them untrue. And so we can start to take on board certain ideas that people around us say, even about Jesus. 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was crucified, the Jews stripped him naked before crucifying him. They strung him up on a cross. There was no loincloth, nothing. He hung there naked, humiliated for all to see. Here we are 2,000 years later, and that is what people are doing now. Muslims, they will tell us, they've got their ideas about Jesus, they reckon that Jesus belongs to them, to their religion. You know that? They claim Jesus for themselves. They say that we distort Jesus. That we have taken Jesus, who they say was a great prophet, a good and a great prophet, that we have taken him and distorted him. They believe that Jesus is coming again. They have a high view of Jesus, or they will tell us they have a high view of Jesus. But let me tell you what Peter says to us. He says this, for 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Simon Peter, a servant and an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who through the righteousness of our God and Saviour Jesus Christ, this is what it says, have received a faith as precious as ours. He's saying there that the faith that we've got is as precious as his faith, Peter. How precious was Peter's faith? Extremely precious. So precious that he died clinging to it because he wouldn't let go of it. He wouldn't let go of any of it. It was that precious to him. It was precious to the Apostle Paul, who also died for it. It was precious to many of the other apostles and early disciples who died clinging on to their faith in a context where they were being told to let go of it or let go of certain aspects of it. And it was precious to them. They would not let Jesus be stripped of any of his virtues, of any of the reality of who he was. But Muslims, they say Jesus is not divine. They strip him of his divinity. They strip him of his holiness and purity. You see, we say, don't we, Jesus was perfectly holy. There was nothing at all wrong about him. They strip him of that. They say he was a man like us. Well, he was, but he was a holy man, unlike us. They strip him of his righteousness because they say he wasn't without sin like we say. In other words, we cannot say of Jesus, he is righteous, full stop. They strip him of his death on the cross. They say that didn't happen. And so they strip him of his resurrection. Basically, what they do, they claim to hold Jesus in high esteem and yet strip him of all the reasons that we worship him for. That's what they do. And you'll know that Islam or Muslims are having a stronger and stronger voice in our society. We're going to feel pressure from them to take on some of their beliefs about Jesus. But it's not just them who strip Jesus The other part that makes up the majority of our environment is secular humanism. Now, you might not be very familiar with that term, but what that means that's people who say that all there is are the things of the natural world. There is no God, they say, and it's all down to us humans. And what they do is many of them will acknowledge that Jesus lived. They'll acknowledge that Jesus lived. They'll acknowledge that he died on the cross. But they strip Jesus of his holiness. They would laugh at us for saying and believing that Jesus was born of a virgin. They strip him of his righteousness and holiness. They strip him of his divinity. They strip him of his resurrection from the cross. Again, they strip him of all the things that we worship him for. This is the environment in which we live. They strip Jesus of his uniqueness as the only true Son of God. They strip him, as the Muslims do, of Jesus' right to be, or the truth that Jesus is God's testimony about himself to the world. What I mean by that is we would say as Christians, if you want to know about God, you look at Jesus. That's where we learn. That's where we find out about God. They say, no. Jesus isn't the kind of epitome of God on earth. Well, he is. They strip him of all those things. They strip Jesus of everything that we worship him for. And this is the environment that we live in. Everything about our environment tells us those things. But it's not just secular humanists and it's not just Muslims. The average person on the street out there does exactly the same. Everyone wants to strip Jesus of all the things that we worship him for. So that people around us, they would say, if you say, do you believe in the virgin birth of Jesus? They would kind of think that's a bit silly, a bit unsophisticated in our day and age. They don't believe those things. If they do, there have been plenty of people out there that say, oh yeah, we believe all that about Jesus, but do you know what? They don't even know anything about him. When they say they believe it, they just like, some people believe in fairies. Well, actually they don't, but that's the equivalent of their belief when it comes to Jesus. Everyone wants to strip Jesus of all that we worship him for. And there's going to be increasing pressure upon us to do the same, as there is. They want to strip Jesus of this faith that is so precious. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to join them in doing that. I'm not going to take Jesus and take away all the things that cause us to worship him. And I want to say, neither are we? You see, here's the thing. When we gather together, we can forget why we gather together. We come together to remind ourselves of how precious our faith is. And we can forget this. Maybe people come to church for different reasons. It could be that people come, and maybe we come sometimes for the social aspect. Well, that's good. It's good to come and enjoy being together. Maybe people come because they want to get something for themselves out of being together. Well, I'm glad if people get something out of it, but that is not the main reason that we come together. We don't come together for ourselves. We come together to do what nobody else is going to do, to acknowledge those things about Jesus. When Peter says to those who through the righteousness of our God and Saviour Jesus Christ have received a faith as precious as ours, by faith he means the things that we believe about Jesus. The things that we believe about Jesus are precious. Do you forget that? Really precious. The question, I think, for us is this. Here's the question, okay? This is a one-question sermon. Do you treasure your treasure? Do you? You think about the things that we believe that everyone else wants to strip Jesus of. I've mentioned them already. His divinity. Jesus is God. Are you thrilled by that? Do you treasure that truth, that belief? Is it right up there on your list of priorities about what's most important to you? His divinity, his righteousness and his holiness and his purity. Do you treasure that? Really? Is this something that you wake up in the morning and you think about and you think, God, thank you so much that you are pure and holy. No other person who has ever lived can claim that. And what we have come to believe about Jesus, we've been given by God. We wouldn't believe it of ourselves. This is precious stuff. That Jesus died on the cross for our sin. These are the things that we believe. This is the faith that we've received. That is precious. How precious is that? Where does it feature? That he was raised and is living. That he's ascended to the Father and intercedes, prays for us. These are the things that are precious. Do you treasure your treasure? You see, we can forget just how important and how precious our faith is and start to treat it, if we're not careful, with contempt. If you imagine, this end is completely treasuring the things of God, and down this end, we've got contempt. Where does your faith sit on that scale? Is it right up here, the most precious thing to you, more precious than your home, more precious than your spouse, more precious than your children, more precious than your life? Is that where it is? Or is it somewhere there are other things that are a bit more important and perhaps it appears somewhere else? Listen, there is nothing more important to you. There is nothing more important than your faith. Nothing. You see, what good is it to have a family and all those other things if you don't have faith? What's the point? It's a disaster. It's more important. Do you treasure your treasure? Well, I know that I don't treasure my treasure enough. But as I think about it, I want to treasure it more. And treasuring our treasure, valuing our faith, is never going to detract from the things that are important in life. It will always make those things more significant, more meaningful. Sometimes we're insecure. We think, if I make too much of my faith, it means I'm not going to be as, these other things aren't going to be as valuable. Actually, it's our faith that gives meaning to everything else. Everything else becomes futile and vain without our faith. That's true, isn't it? What is the point in anything without Jesus? What is the point? So, do you treasure your treasure? Well, here's a few things that we can think about to help us answer that question. What does it mean to treasure our treasure? I think of the movie, the series, the book, The Lord of the Rings. Or Lord of the Rings. And Gollum, he had a bit of treasure, didn't he? Yeah? What was his treasure?
The ring.
The ring. Okay, now you know that Gollum treasured that ring, don't you? Because there would be, in the cave, in darkness, all on his own, sitting on a rock, gazing at the ring. And it was enough. Didn't matter about his environment, nothing else mattered. All that matters was what he called his precious. I'm not going to try and do a imitation, but yeah, an impersonation. His precious, he called it, didn't he? And this is how we know it was so. It doesn't take long, does it, in the film to see how important the ring is to Gollum, does it? Very quickly you get it. Yeah, the ring means everything to Gollum. Here's a question: how long do you think it would take for someone to work out that your faith or my faith is the most important thing to us? How long do you think it would take? If they was to observe you in your life, how long would it take for them to work out, wow, they really love, they're well into this thing that they've got, these beliefs, these ideas that they've got, they love it. Our faith. Remember, our faith isn't a kind of an abstract thing. It's the beliefs that we have about Jesus. So it's a faith that is focused on Jesus. It's like saying Jesus is the ring that we treasure. the things that we believe about him, how long would it take? Well, Gollum's a good example for us. You see, he gazed at that ring. He would check every now and then that he's still got it, that it's still there, and he'd pull it out and just check it, make sure it's not some sort of imitation, make sure he hasn't lost it. And I think that's something that we need to do. We need to gaze, look at, think about our faith. Make sure that we're not taking on wrong ideas about it. Make sure that the things that we believe are still true. Make sure that we value and prioritise those things. Check it. Make sure it's still in its place where it should be. So we would do well, really, to be like Gollum. That's just a very simple thing that we can do. Keep looking at it. You know, that's why we come to church, to be reminded of the things that we believe about Jesus, the truths that we've come to believe. That's why we're here. So continuing and continually coming and learning and relishing these truths. You know, don't listen just passively as you listen to these things. And, you know, when I said Jesus' divinity, do you know that is a bombshell? It's not a small thing. It's like, oh yeah, he just talked about Jesus' divinity. Jesus is God. These are wonderful things. When we hear that, the fact that you believe it means that you have been chosen by God. That is a phenomenal thing. To rejoice in these things is what we should be doing. So to just think about those things, those things that we believe, that's a good thing to do. Here's a second thing. So, you know, gaze upon it, think about it. Make the most, you know, if we value it really, we'll make the most of every opportunity we get to do that. That's what we'll do. Gollum, every time he got the chance, he'd take it out and look at it. Someone else would come along and quickly hide it because he didn't want to lose it. I'm not suggesting we hide it, but we make the most of every opportunity to gaze upon, to look upon Jesus and the truths about him. Here's the second thing. Practice it. Okay, when we value something, we practice it. You know, there's a number of us, all of us are into something. Saw a photograph of H yesterday, wallowing in the mud. That's what she loves to do. I don't know if anyone else saw that. Anyone see that? Yeah. So we've seen it. There's evidence of it. But some people love to wallow in the mud. H loves to do that. That's what she does. If she gets a bit of spare time, she's out there. Other people are into other things, okay? But you think about the things that you're into, right? So actually, H is like super healthy. She's like always working out and got massive muscles, and that's why Alan always looks a bit intimidated. And but H is into health, and some of you are into cricket. As I look around, some of you are well into cricket. Yeah, you know me, I've got into my motorbike lately, and there's certain things, right, that we all probably enjoy and like. And if we're not able to enjoy those things at the moment, it's because there are other things going on in our lives that mean we can't because of time and all sorts of pressures, right? But when we get a chance, that's what we'll be doing, yeah? And if it's a sport or anything like that, what do? We want to practice. We make the most of the opportunity to practice, to do the things that we're interested in. And the more we do it, the better it gets. Not only the better do we get at it, but the more we enjoy it, right? When you practice something, that's what happens. And so we should practice our faith. Practice, do the things we believe. Let me give you just one example, and I stole this. I did have a couple of others, but this is such a good one, and I stole it from John Piper. He's good, isn't he? You can steal anything you like from him. He's happy about that. Okay, but he said this at the recent conference that's just happened last week. He said that Christians, that's us, we should not be. You know, Christians are often, at least a certain wing of the church, goes on a lot about justice. You know, people of justice. He kind of says that's a load of rubbish. We, as Christians, do not want to be known for justice. You see, when Jesus died on the cross, it wasn't justice that we got. We got grace. God got justice. Justice is the minimum that we want for people. That's the absolute minimum. But grace means this. When Jesus died upon the cross, he took our place and died for all the things that we have done wrong. He took our punishment while we was completely ignoring him, kind of thing. That's grace. Not only did he take our sin upon himself, it's like he took the account, all the record of our sin, God knows it all. Not only did he take that and have that put into his account, but his righteousness was given freely to us. That is amazing grace. So that we don't get what we deserve. You know, some people think, oh, I deserve this in life. I deserve that in life. Listen, do not ask God for what you deserve. Okay, it's not a good idea. But ask him for grace. God pours out grace. Grace means this: undeserved kindness. Kindness that we don't deserve. So if we are going to practice our faith, how about maybe over this next week and in the weeks to come, think about this. How can I show grace to someone? Get concrete about it. Practice it. Think about someone who doesn't deserve anything from you. Maybe who deserves to be ignored by you because maybe they ignore you or something like that. Think about someone real, someone concrete, and think, what can I do to show them the amazing love of God? What good, kind thing can I do to that person, even though they don't deserve it? And here's something else you could try doing, okay? As you give grace, as you pour out grace, find some people to be objects of your grace. As you pour out grace upon people, then the next week, try and outdo yourself. Try and do even more grace. And practice grace towards one another within the church, towards our neighbours. Maybe you don't even know your next door neighbour. Knock on their door and say, we're having a barbecue and we thought you might like to join us. That would be grace. Maybe it means forgiving someone and being kind to them even though they've treated you badly. We're not here just to listen, are we? We don't want to be those who hear and don't do the word of God. Let's practice grace. Think about, who can I show grace to this week? We walk the extra mile, don't we? And what I say about getting concrete, I said about the thing, gazing into our beliefs, the things that we believe. I don't know, here's something you can do to that end, okay? That is, read biographies about God. Are you reading a book at the moment about God? If not, why? Probably because you don't have the time. Make time. Just do it. And even if you read like a couple of paragraphs a day, if that's it, that's fine. But get into finding out about God. This is what we do to learn, isn't it? We read biographies, we read other books about the things that we believe. If you're not sure about what to read, ask me. I'll give you some titles, okay? And I'm sure others have got some good books for you to read. But do it. Don't just hear and not do. If we're going to value our faith and treat as precious, this precious faith that we have been given, that's been entrusted to us, then if we're going to value it, we'll do those things. So we look into it and we practice it. We find out about it. We join others together with believers. Monday night, it's at the Woodcrafts. It's very easy to not do that stuff because there are so many other demands. But when we consider something truly precious, then what do? We go out of our way for those things. We're prepared to be inconvenienced for them. Why? Because it's precious. It's important. And maybe it's not as important to us as it ought to be. It certainly isn't to me a lot of the time. But I want to get better at it. And I hope you do too. So we make the most of the opportunities that we get to be together with those that share our faith. And when we're together, let's do our best to encourage one another in those things, to remind one another about those things. It's good to socialise, but let's not just be a social people that, when we get together, we just have a good time. That's great. But let's be focused on the Lord as well. Involve him in our time together. I do think this, and I think this is true, that we shouldn't feel awkward, particularly, we're Christians, we should not feel awkward when we're hanging out to just pray now and then. You know, we might think, oh, yeah, now I'm doing this. So, yeah, when we're at church, we pray together, but now I'm just around someone's house. We don't actually pray together. Why not? Yeah, if we believe he's present, we can speak to him, include him, so that he becomes more and more a part of our everyday life, in our relationships and in the things that we're doing. So, let me just recap those things. We find out about our faith. We gaze upon it. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the writer to the Hebrews says, the author and perfecter of our faith. Fix your eyes on him. So we gaze at him. We practice our faith. And you can think of other things to do to practice your faith and find out about it. Make the most of these opportunities to share together. You know, we can get excited about Jesus. Other people won't. And if we don't, then who? You know? So let's make the most of these opportunities. We make sacrifices for it. Yeah, when it comes to making sacrifices, okay, this is what we can do again. Yeah, this is how we forget about the importance of our faith. When I was at school, I wasn't like, the sensible kids. I did not value education. Okay, I bet I'm not the only one in the room that didn't value education while you was at school. I didn't value it. And because I didn't value it, I didn't sacrifice for it. Instead, I wanted to just have a good time. And now I look back and I think, what an idiot I was, because I didn't realise the value of my faith. And so I was just going out, having a good time, squandering my time, while others were sacrificing those things and working hard. So it's hard to do that, isn't it? But it's exactly the same with our faith. It's easy to think, I just want to go and have a good time and do this and do that. And so we squander the opportunities that we've got when we could be sacrificing some of those things in order to invest in our faith. So I want to encourage you to be prepared to do that. To believe, don't believe the lie of the world that it's not worth it, that these other things are more valuable. They're not. Okay, some of those things are valuable and there's a balance to be had, certainly. But it's precious. This is the most precious thing. The last thing that I want to say is this. When we value something, we fight for it. We fight for it, don't we? How many of us, the things that you value most, you would fight for them. And as a community of believers, as those entrusted with the gospel and with the truth, living in an environment that wants to suppress all of that, we have to fight to overcome those things. When I say fight, I don't mean be aggressive to people around us at all. I'm not meaning that at all. But often it's a fight against ourselves to overcome fears, to overcome the desire for pleasure over faithfulness to God and the gospel. It's something we have to fight for, to be unashamed about our voice being heard in the public square, as it were. Lots of people would say, we have no problem with you being a Christian, as long as, you keep it within the walls of church and in your own home, that's fine. But don't go bringing it into the public place. We must. That is exactly what we should do. And I'll tell you why we should do it. Because what we believe is true. Yeah, one of the things that I love most about our faith is that it is true. Everyone around us would say, you can't say that. Yes, we can, because it is. And here's why. Unlike other faiths, other religions are prepared to say, with the exception of Islam, other religions are prepared to say, okay, we'll privatise what we believe. Well, if I was them, I would privatise it because what they believe isn't true. And if they bring it into the public square, it will be shown to be a load of rubbish. Because every other religion is false, ultimately. But Christianity, the reason we bring it into the public square is because it will stand. Because it is true. And you'll notice that when we do bring it into the public square, what do people do? They say, put that away, hide it away. They don't say, what's wrong with it? They might say something like, you can't say that. They don't say why. They might say, that's just your opinion. They don't qualify that statement. And we need to say, okay, Why do you say that? That means that what you're saying that I believe is not true, but it is, and you ought to believe it too. We must not allow the world around us to force us to trivialise our faith into a private little belief, when actually it's the defining truth of the whole world. This is what's being entrusted to us. This is precious. This is what Paul writes. He puts it like this: "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does." Now, you notice that? He doesn't say, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war. He doesn't say that. He says, we do not wage war as the world does. In other words, we do wage war, just in a different way. Okay? So this is a fight. It is. For something that we hold hugely precious, and I want to encourage us, let's roll up our sleeves and get into that fight. Okay, it says this: we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. We're not like Muslims. We don't draw the sword and behead those that don't believe. That's not the kind of war that we fight. On the contrary, in other words, completely different to that, on the contrary, they have divine power. This is what it says. This is what we do: to demolish strongholds. Okay, so how do we fight? We demolish strongholds. Well, what does that mean? This is what it means. We demolish, it says, arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. In other words, all the arguments that people would bring to say that Jesus isn't true, all the lies that people would bring, we stand up against those, and we annihilate and we demolish every single pretension, every single argument that would say that what we believe isn't true. And we can do that because what we believe is true. We don't need to be afraid. So we do wage war. And this is what Jude says. Jude wrote to the people he wrote to, he says this: I felt compelled to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to God's holy people. He wrote to these people, urging them to contend for the faith that was entrusted. Do you see this? We got a battle to fight. So, we have a faith as precious as Peter's. We need to value it. Do you treasure your treasure? Make the most of the opportunities that you've got to find out about your faith. Get your nose stuck in some good books. Get together with believers whenever you can. Don't just get together, but be focused on God, praying, reminding one another about the value of our faith, the great privilege that we have in believing that it's precious. Be prepared to make sacrifices for it, because nobody else will. And be prepared to fight for what we believe by exposing lies and error. Get involved wherever you can. Don't just sit on the margins leaving it to other people. Get involved. There is nothing more valuable that you have than the treasure of your faith. Nothing. Let's encourage one another in that. Let's pray.